The future of America's overseas aid agency is in doubt, with President Trump freezing programs and employees told not to come to work. The United States Agency for International Development, known as USAID, provides food aid, disaster relief, and global health programs. But as Trump puts America first, what's the impact on the world's poorest people? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, funding for USAID halted overnight after Donald Trump and Elon Musk made big changes to US federal spending. So, are the cuts a reflection of President Trump's transactional approach to foreign relations, or is he making legitimate savings on taxpayers' cash?
Former employees and contractors make a stand outside the closed USAID offices in Washington. A sudden shutdown of the government agency responsible for foreign aid and global development projects. It's been closed by Elon Musk, who has been carrying out Donald Trump's cost-cutting agenda.
The USAID is really corrupt. I'll tell you, it's corrupt. It's incompetent and it's really corrupt.
Only 294 USAID employees out of over 10,000 were retained. The agency's website shut down, and over 30 clinical trials for treatment against malaria, cholera and cervical cancer put on pause. The cut to HIV care has jeopardised treatment to 20 million people, including 500,000 children.
This has nothing to do with evaluation. This is about termination and obliteration of the major foreign aid programs of the United States of America, all of which together total less than $40 billion. We're not going to allow this to happen. It will not stand.
The United States is the biggest spender on foreign aid, paying out almost $65 billion in 2023. That's 0.24% of their national income. In 2023, Ukraine received the most money from USAID, totaling $16.5 billion, much more than the amounts given to Jordan, Ethiopia, Somalia and the Congo. After legal challenges were brought against the sudden decision, a judge has asked Trump's administration to temporarily lift the funding freeze. But for now, the agency that's played a central role in US foreign policy for the past 63 years is in limbo. Will it be shut down entirely, or will President Trump only want to give out aid for something in return?
Well, let's meet our guests in Geneva, in Switzerland. Mukesh Kapila, he is a former UN advisor. In Oakland, California, Anuradha Mittal, she's Executive Director of the Oakland Institute. And I'm delighted to say, here with me in the studio, we have Alex Smith. He's a former USAID contractor. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Alex, to you, first of all, is the world ready for the impact of this decision by President Trump and his administration?
No, not at all. This decision came very abruptly. It cut off aid immediately to millions of people around the world. The world was not prepared for that sudden cutting off of malaria drugs, of HIV treatment, of maternal and child health services. This is a disaster for the world. It
was that quick. It just literally, overnight. He made the decision overnight.
Overnight.
Wow. Mukesh, give us your impression of what this will do to some of the poorest people on earth.
I think we're already seeing the impact, and it's pretty brutal. We see, for example, health clinics suddenly closing their doors. We see boxes of food aid lying in warehouses unable to be distributed. We see local aid workers, and most aid is actually delivered by locals on the ground, suddenly without a contract. And we see a lot of uncertainty and concern, especially in those countries that are heavily dependent on American foreign aid.
Anuradha, to you, how much of a betrayal of the world's poorest people is this by the United States government?
Well, as has been pointed out by Alex and Mukesh, United States has been a partner with the global community to deal with some of the biggest challenges, whether it is HIV/AIDS pandemic or whether it is tuberculosis, malaria. So the impact is disastrous, but it's important to also take into account the disastrous impact on the United States of America. foreign aid has been the tool for a foreign policy. It has been the way to reward its allies and punish its foes. So to suddenly take away that tool is going to have a disastrous impact on the United States, where it is being seen as a pariah state, a country which wants to impose its imperialist hegemony around the world and not carry the international share of things.
Alex, to you, President Trump will no doubt be feeling that he is putting America first here, but at what price, as Anuradha has just alluded to?
Absolutely. And I think that's the reason why USAID was targeted first, because it doesn't remove health care from voters in the Midwest. People in South Africa who are really going to bear the brunt of this, they don't vote in American elections. So that's why they went for USAID. But the impact is going to be massive. The head of UNAIDS estimates that if they don't find new sources of funding very quickly, we could see a 400% increase in HIV in Southern Africa, which could lead to 6 million or more deaths.
I mean, it's shocking statistics.
It is.
Mukesh, do you think President Trump cares about the way this is being seen around the world?
No, I'm not sure President Trump cares about anything other than his own personal mission as defined by himself. And I think he also likes to shock and to disrupt. And it is part of his tactics to bring about change in terms of the world bending to his will. So I suspect what's going to happen is that we will see a resumption of American aid in some form or other, in some ways or other, but more tightly tied into American foreign policy interests. And in that sense, I think the rest of the world will have to adjust sooner rather than later to the changes that are already underway.
Anuradha, who is Trump playing to here? Is this a message to countries around the world that it is America first and will always be for the next 4 years? Or is he sending a message to his electorate in the United States that this is me delivering on my promise to put you first?
You know, that's a great question. What Trump is doing here is he's playing to his electorate. Most of them are misinformed. They do not understand that the US aid, when we talk about, for instance, say food aid, is procured from US agribusinesses. So actually it is going to hurt farmers in Kansas, Texas, Iowa, whose products are shipped to countries which might be in need of humanitarian aid very often because of the wars that are being launched. So the whole message is about being America first, but this is going to hurt America. This is not about America first. Secondly, it's also really important to remember that the whole thing is about efficiency. Now, US aid budget is less than 1% of the federal budget. So if it was really about efficiency, Trump would have gone after the Pentagon, Department of Defense, whose budgets are almost 15% or more of the federal budget. So this is not about efficiency. It's about him once again lying to the people who have voted in him. And these are calculated risks that this man continues to take, which are disastrous for the United States and, of course, for the most marginalized around the world.
So, Alex, in a nutshell, what I'm picking up here is that this was an easy win for Trump, taking money from the poorest people around the world because his core base of supporters in the United States don't care about them.
I think he might have miscalculated on that. I think that some people in the Midwest, the farmers were mentioned, they're going to suffer from this. But I think people are going to see the ramifications of this decision, and that when you see people not being able to get AIDS drugs, when you see horrible suffering, when you see pregnant women not getting the care they need, that is going to have an impact. And as your other guest said, there's a perception. There was a Kaiser Family Foundation poll where Americans thought that 1/3 of our federal spending was going to foreign aid. And as you said, it's less than 1%. It's about 0.7%. But people will understand that foreign aid was creating goodwill, that it was doing a lot of good in the world. And seeing it disappear overnight is going to have a disastrous impact. And like with Gaza, we're going to see people suffering in our feeds, on our social media, and that is going to have an impact.
So you think long-term this will come back to bite the United States in some form?
I think absolutely. And we've already seen Russia and China celebrating this move because it completely vacates the position as the moral leader of humanitarian aid. We vacated that position.
Mukesh, to you, I mean, did he really need to do this, or was this just a very selfish, self-centered decision to make very, very quickly for a quick win?
Well, obviously, it's a self-centered policy, as are also his other policies, whether it's on trade or sanctions or on threatening European defense and so on. At the same time, however, there is, with Trump, there is always a little kernel of something underneath his approach. And it's a wake-up call to the rest of the world as well. You know, the aid business has been going now for well over 40, 50 years, since the Second World War, really. And over that time, the aid business has expanded. It's worth hundreds of billions, with thousands of organizations involved, and certainly hundreds of aid agencies. And the whole UN system depends on it, as well as the Red Cross and numerous NGOs, many of whom are multi-billion-dollar enterprises in their own right. The situation where we have become so aid-dependent, and that also on American aid, I think has not been a healthy one. And if Trump is doing us any favors, it is to force a self-reflection that it's not a sustainable way of either removing poverty in the world or continuing to look after the most vulnerable people without reducing the dependencies that too many countries have, and taking away the agency of those countries to look after their own people. So I have to tell you, I'm somewhat ambivalent about this whole situation. And I think we have to use this opportunity to make a bigger and different way of interacting.
Anuradha, what are the opportunities then that this presents? I mean, presumably other countries are going to have to step up and fill that financial gap.
Definitely, I think we have to see it as an opportunity. On one hand, United States, which has used aid as its foreign policy tool, it has used it to promote, for instance, large-scale industrial agriculture. It has used it to promote its model of fortress conservation. It allows policy space for countries to determine what kind of policies they want. But it also encourages other countries to step into this space, whether it is the Global South. We have seen the Hague Group come together when we have seen the failure of the West when it came to genocide in Gaza. So I think it's actually going to allow and topple United States from its place of hegemony, and the kind of space it occupies is international policy making, and allow other countries to step up as international cooperation partners. It is going to be a very strong message to the United States. For people who think this is about America first, we don't have to always think of HIV crisis in Africa or malaria or tuberculosis in places like India. Let's not forget COVID. It was international cooperation, diseases that are not stopped at borders. We need international cooperation, and for United States and for Trump and his supporters to believe that this is about America first. This is about isolating America.
Alex, to you, is there a feeling in the Trump camp that there are plenty of rich countries around the world? So why is the United States constantly being leaned on for more and more? Is that part of their thinking here?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Trump administration, as with NATO, they want other countries to pay a larger percentage of these shared costs. The problem is, and Dr. Tedros, the head of WHO, World Health Organization, said today, is doing this move overnight is the biggest problem. Tedros said that, over time, perhaps, other countries could fill those gaps, but if you just cut off programs suddenly overnight, that creates a problem.
So which countries do you think will see step up? Because India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, they all donate and play their part on the international stage. Who else do you think will step up?
I think that China will play a big role. They haven't to date really done what USAID does, but they have done massive infrastructure projects and other road building and water and sanitation systems. So perhaps they will fill the gap, as you mentioned. Turkey also is playing a large role in the region, and other donors, Japan, some of the European powers will have to try to fill those gaps.
Mukesh, do you think some of these aid agencies and NGOs could be run more efficiently then to try and save money?
Well, almost certainly. I think the aid world is, having spent all my life in the aid world, either giving aid or receiving aid, I think the aid world has become highly dependent. They've become bloated, they have become inefficient, and very definitely there are elements of fraud and corruption in all agencies. That's true of all big agencies, including government agencies. Having said that, can I come back on an important point? I love my American friends, and we want a lot of American aid, and Americans are the most generous, open-hearted people in the world from my own long experience of them. But to be honest, I think linking American aid to seeking American influence sticks in my throat, in the same way that more Chinese aid linked to Chinese influence would stick in my throat too. And for example, British aid, I'm British, I spent most of my life in British aid also, having more British influence or having more British aid to promote British influence is a wrong reason for giving aid. We give aid in order to help people who are in need, because they're vulnerable, because they're sick, because they're poverty-stricken. We should not give aid because it advances American foreign policy, British foreign policy, European foreign policy, or anybody's foreign policy. Now, the reason we are in this mess and trouble, why domestically and internationally, aid is not having much of constituency support, apart, of course, from those of us who work in the aid business and have earned a living from aid, is because we have lost the moral purpose behind aid. No, we do not want American aid linked to American foreign policy. That is a wrong reason for doing it. And there's a wrong reason for anybody's aid. And aid agencies, whether it's the UN aid agencies or the big multinational NGOs, should stop becoming conduits of the foreign policies of the major donors. And that's at the heart of this struggle to reinvent aid in a more moral way in an extremely divided world. And I don't know why people are not debating more about this.
Anuradha, I can see you nodding in agreement with every word Mukesh has just said.
Yeah, I mean, when we think of aid, we think of helping those who are in marginalized, vulnerable situations. But it is the unfortunate reality. And that's how it has been used by countries such as the United States. And once again, I would talk about efficiency and say we might think that it is needs to be cut down, that we are spending way too much money on helping the poor around the world. Matter of the fact is that it is less than 1% of the federal budget, that it is the highest recipients of it last year have been Ukraine, countries like Israel and Ethiopia, countries which are fighting proxy wars for the United States. So as Mukesh said, international aid should be driven by a moral purpose, that we are a global community, we are an international community, we stand together. But in a world of wars, in a world of controlling resources, aid has turned into a monopoly board. We are talking about if US moves out, the influence of China comes in. We should be having a different conversation, which is, as international community, how do we strive towards a world which is sustainable, which is peaceful, in a world where there's enough food for everyone? We know that we produce enough food for everyone to be fed. There is no place for hunger. There is no place for nobody to be sheltered. And yet, we continue to see hunger, we continue to see disease, and the problem is the policies that come from politicians like Trump.
Alex, to you, how do Americans feel then when they're being told by their president that giving money to the poorest people on earth is wrong, and yet billions of dollars get signed off for Israel on a regular basis? I mean, if you want to save money, surely that's an obvious point.
That would be, yeah. And I think a lot of people are picking up on what a misallocation of funds it is to give money to the bombing of children when we should be giving money to the saving of children in malnutrition clinics, for example. I do want to just slightly push back on a little bit of what the other guests were saying.
Go for it.
I think it is true that the aid that has been given recently has been, those decisions have been political. For example, you mentioned Ukraine, which received 10 times more than the next closest recipient, which was Ethiopia. Ukraine was getting 16 billion. And there are other political decisions made. For example, having food shipped from American farmers to other countries is very inefficient. It would make a lot more sense to give cash to other countries to be able to buy.
But isn't there a worry, as Trump says, that there's corruption and fraud and you give money to these countries and it doesn't actually filter down?
Well, it's a decades-long policy, and I think the main reason was the optics of having bags of food arrive with American flags on them was what Congress wanted. But I will say, pushing back a little bit, that the U.S. hasn't always just funded allies. We've given $3.6 billion in aid to Afghanistan after the Taliban took over in 2021, because it was saving lives, because it was providing that maternal health care and emergency food aid. It was mostly directed through UN agencies. But that was a decision to put saving lives above politics, and that's the way it should be. I think we all agree on that. I fear that in the near future and in the next 4 years, we're going to see a new Trump/Musk doctrine in which aid is absolutely conditional on doing what Trump wants, and that could be anything from, we've already seen South Africa cut off because they're supporting the ICJ case, the genocide
against
case.
Israel.
Yeah. We could see countries threaten to vote against Palestinian statehood in the General Assembly. We could see countries have to allow the U.S. to exploit their natural resources.
So he's going to weaponize aid.
Exactly. It's going to be used as a bargaining chip, but more accurately as a threat. This life-saving aid, you won't get it unless you do what we want.
I'll just come back to Mukesh. Mukesh, how do you feel about that, hearing that Trump and his administration in the years to come, that this is what they're going to do? You do what we say, or you don't get any aid?
Well, I think that is to be expected if the Trump-type thinking continues to gain ascendancy. And unfortunately, it's not limited to the United States. We are seeing exactly similar thinking coming to the fore here in Europe, with the European Union conditioning its aid to working with the horrendous regimes to control migration, for example.
We all knew President Trump was coming. We all knew it would be America first. I mean, he telegraphed what was going to happen for months and months. Should these aid agencies have seen this coming?
I think it is still a surprise the way it has been done. You would have thought that there would be conversations in the Congress. We have to understand that right now, you have a person, Elon, making these decisions for President Trump, somebody who's not been elected and voted by the American people into office. The so-called DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is not an agency like USAID, which has been created by the Congress. So we are seeing an attack on democracy in the United States of America. We saw the insurrection on January 6th. This is Elon Musk and Trump doing insurrection within the US Congress. This is a complete state capture. So it has taken everyone by surprise. One thing I would like to say, to kind of push back on what Mukesh just said, we have to look at the colonial geopolitics. Right now, we all know when we look at DRC, it's a country which is in desperate need of aid. You have the largest number of displaced people because of the conflict. What we don't understand, that these wars are being fought for its blood minerals which are fueling the industry of Western countries as well as China and others, whether it's a cell phone, whether it's a Tesla car. It is those T3 blood minerals. So when we talk about creating wars and responsibility of countries like DRC, we are forgetting that M23 rebels are being supported by Rwanda, which in turn is being supported by Western countries. So we talk about aid, forgetting the role of geopolitics, where we continue to colonize African countries, we continue to colonize the rest of the global South, and talk about that they're independent now, they should be able to take care of the people.
Alex, final point to you. Will he change his mind?
No. I think, unfortunately, Trump never admits that he made a mistake. He never admits that he was wrong. He made that claim about $50 million worth of condoms going to Hamas to make bombs, which is It would be funny if it wasn't so sad that he was going to double down on that. Literally, he increased the number from 50 million to 100 million. There's no evidence. We haven't had condom programs in the Middle East for the last 4 years. The sum total of all condom buying by USAID amounts to 7 million for the entire world. So it's just a ridiculous lie, but he will never admit that. And he's shown that he was willing to defund a $100 million program for International Medical Corps in Gaza that was field hospitals. That was what he said was the condom program. So he will never admit he's wrong. He will just double down and make things worse.
And we will see in the coming months and years the fallout from this catastrophic decision.
Absolutely.
Alex, thank you. Mukesh and Anuradha as well. Superb to hear from you. Thank you both so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye. Thank you for watching.